Well, hello everyone. Thank you again so very much for sitting down and joining me today. It's very nice to meet you if I haven't already met you in some way, shape, or form. My name is Tom Selleck, and today we've got a feature presentation for you today. And a little side note, when it came to this particular feature presentation, when I had picked this film up, it was one that I definitely did have the high hopes for, but I didn't think it was going to be one that I was going to stick for a feature presentation type of video, because I do have some videos that I've got, like a video series that I have coming up that's more of a short form style review for films that I don't particularly want to dedicate an entire video to, or I feel that I don't have enough to talk about to dedicate an entire video to. And in all honesty, I thought this was definitely going to be, in that category, but man, I was definitely wrong, and I'll explain why. Today's feature presentation that we're going to be talking about today is Gretel and Hansel. And as you can see, do not have an esteemed guest today. You might be able to see a couple of peeps behind me, but yeah, it's a work in progress. It was very limited space, and you're trying to do with what you can, but there's no room for an esteemed guest right now. Apologize, maybe one day we'll be able to kind of get that into maybe a little bit of a different way of doing so. But let's kind of forego that and go on to today's feature presentation. So just to give like a quick sort of summary, Gretel and Hansel is a dark reimagining of Hansel and Gretel, the German Grimm fairy tale. Now, most people are going to be familiar with Hansel and Gretel, so I don't feel that I necessarily need to fully go into it, but if for some reason you are not familiar with the fairy tale, then I'll give a very brief synopsis of what happens. You have two German kids, Hansel and Gretel, and they are in the woods, and they end up coming across a house that is made of gingerbread with all of these delicious smells coming out of it that lures them inside. And then of course there is going to be a witch, and her sole aim is to eat, or to cook and eat, Hansel and Gretel. That's the basic, the basic story behind the fairy tale. This is obviously a completely different reimagining of that original fairy tale. And with this reimagining, I definitely had high hopes for enjoying it, because I really do enjoy fairy tales. I enjoy more darker presentations of fairy tales, because the original Grimm fairy tales are very grim. They are this, there's definitely a morality to the entire story. They are tales of virtue in a certain way. However, there is a level of darkness, because to keep the morality or the message intact, it was always wrapped around a type of ill fate that would meet the child who would not adhere to the message of the story. And the particular messages of Gretel and Hansel are actually present in this film. For instance, the big thing of overindulgence was a big message of Hansel and Gretel, as well as to be wary of gifts. That's sort of one thing that they keep strong in this one, is nothing given without anything taken. That's a big message that they keep in Gretel and Hansel. And as I said before with Gretel and Hansel, this is not a telling of the fairy tale, it is a reimagining of the fairy tale. So with that being said, there are some things that are omitted that were included in the original story that are not present here. The two main things, it's not going to be any sort of spoilers, because I do not go into spoiler territory when it comes to my reviews. I try not to discuss any plot points that are not going to be relevant and easily found by reading the synopsis. But one of the biggest things is arguably the most famous part of Hansel and Gretel, the story, which is going to be the breadcrumbs, because in the story, Hansel and Gretel leave a trail of breadcrumbs as they are walking through the woods. That way they can easily find their way back home. However, in Gretel and Hansel, the circumstances that bring them into the woods and ultimately lead them to the house of Hulda, the witch, are completely different. And they are arguably much, much more dark, because that's sort of the whole thing, is a dark reimagining. There's even an inclusion of a very brief character to kind of help connect these points together. And then another big part that is one of the other more famous parts in the story is the gingerbread house. The house is not made of gingerbread in this particular story. However, it would have been really cool if there was some way to kind of still make it really creepy but have it be this edible house. However, that is omitted in lieu of just a very gothic style home. And that's really a big thing to kind of go into this. This is very much, in a lot of ways, a gothic horror story, because now this is a PG-13 horror film. Now, I'm not going to say anything negative about PG-13 horror, because obviously An MPAA rating has absolutely nothing to do with the film. However, most people that are horror fans know. I mean, and a lot of people will sort of, they hear PG-13 horror, they may kind of roll their eyes because PG-13 horror is associated with a couple of different things. One of the biggest things is jump scares. By utilizing jump scares over any other sort of terror or horror-filled methods. And there are going to be some jump scares that are in this, primarily, really just more so in the beginning, because the producers of this film worked on Sinister and the Autopsy of Jane Doe, the latter of which I haven't seen, but I have seen Sinister, and the jump scares are very much in line with that sort of film. But this is not your typical PG-13 horror. This does not really follow any of the tropes, because the biggest thing that this is going off of, this is why, in my opinion, out of the modern horror movies that I have seen that have come out this year, and there are so many more that I haven't seen, so many more to come, and we're not even in October yet, this is top of the list right now, because the main thing that this movie has going for it is the atmosphere, the presence, the dread, the tension. They're nailing these points, because that is the sort of thing that is going to drive this level of anxiety, this level of tension, and this sort of nervous fear that you're going to be getting from the characters that is then going to be translating to you. Gretel is played by Sophia Lillis, I believe is how you pronounce her last name. She was Bev in the It remakes. Hansel is portrayed by Sam Leakey, who is, this is his acting debut and someone with a very bright future ahead of him. And Alice Krige plays Hulda, the witch, who does an absolutely phenomenal performance. She does this really interesting sort of parallel between a nursing home grandmother and total psychopath. There's a really weird sort of middle that she's able to find with that. And speaking of that, the costume design and the costume choices for the witch are absolutely stellar. I really, really enjoy them. However, Alice Krige seems to have some sort of prosthetic on her teeth, which at times does make her a little bit difficult to understand. So that is a bit of a minor gripe that you may want to take into consideration. If you do already have any sort of hearing difficulties, closed captioning is definitely going to be recommended for this, because there are moments where even I was having difficulty hearing her, where I did have to rewind to try to understand what it was that she had actually said. So as I was saying before, the atmospheric horror to this is what makes it so impactful to me. Now, that may necessarily or may not necessarily be everybody's bag, but as a lover of horror, I do enjoy many different types of horror, and that atmospheric horror is one of my favorites because it is so very difficult to nail down, especially in the look of the film and in the stylized choices. And Oz Parkins has done a phenomenal job with this, and he's actually slated to direct a Paul Tremblay's adaptation, or the adaptation of Paul Tremblay's book, A Head Full of Ghosts, which is going to be another horror tale. And this definitely shows that he definitely does have a bright future when it comes to that, because he is nailing these choices. Because most of it is going off of the overall look of the film, which is gorgeous. It is very fairy tale-esque in a lot of ways. In fact, one of the things that is done here when it comes to cinematography, it's a bit of a gimmick. There is a slightly different aspect ratio for this, not quite to the level of The Lighthouse, and in my opinion, it doesn't even really do the same thing that The Lighthouse does. To be frank, after the prologue, there's this little brief prologue that kind of explains a sort of fairy tale within the fairy tale. And honestly, it was about 15 to 20 minutes before I even realized that it was done in a sort of funky aspect ratio. And it's supposed to be looking like pages of a storybook, and I guess in a way it kind of does, but it was really unnecessary. There was no reason to do it, but in my opinion, it really doesn't make a difference because it took 20 minutes for me to even actually realize it. Could be because I was watching a lot of things on DVD prior to that, so maybe my eyes were a little bit trained, but you know, be that as it may. But the look of the film is the most impressive because that is where all the horror is coming from. Mixing that with Alice Krige's performance and getting the hesitation and the cautiousness of Gretel that is coming off of Sophia Lillis and having that translated to the viewer is phenomenal. There is some really great editing shots and stuff like that, really more towards the latter half of the film, that are really going to give you that sort of satisfaction for your horror, because this is not a slow burn. I do not believe that it is a slow burn. but it does move along at a more leisurely pace because it is pulling you in, it is drawing you in, and that's what this type of horror is really supposed to do. And I think that they've absolutely nailed it with this one. And I'm telling you, this is, at this point, it is so far one of my favorite films that I have seen this year as far as modern films that have come out this year that I have seen. Because this was put out by United Artists and put out through Warner Brothers for home video release. And especially when it comes to horror, our horror of this year, 2020, this is top of the list for me right now. So much more to come, so much more to see, but right now, this is holding a very, very high flame against everything else that I've seen. Special feature wise, there isn't anything on here. There is basically a gallery when it comes to displaying the cinematography, which is definitely the strong point of the film, but there are no special features on here to speak of. But I may have actually enjoyed some of the special features if they had added a little bit more, because I've said it before, and I'll kind of go into a little real briefly. My opinion on special features, when it comes to major our major releases, nowadays I don't even bother watching the special features because most of them are the equivalent of a dandelion, where I'll spend tons and tons of time with these special features, and it's a waste of all that tons and tons of time because it's usually just a round table of congratulations and congratulations on everybody else. The main insightful thing that's going to be found on a major label release when it comes to special features is a commentary track, and if I really enjoy the commentary, really enjoy the flick, then I'll revisit it with the commentary track, because married with 2 kids, time is limited. So obviously not going to watch every commentary, but if I really like the film, I'll watch it. That's why the boutique label releases that are putting out 30-plus-year-old flicks, those are the special features that I really get into. But beside the point, I've alluded to it a couple times, but I figured I'd just kind of throw it out there. But I'm telling you, if you like horror, if you like fairy tales, or if you just like to see really good set pieces, really good tension, really good design, check out Gretel and Hansel. I'm telling you, you will not be disappointed. This is one to check out. So guys, thank you so very much for sitting down and going over with today's feature presentation with me today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel for more additional content. We do have these feature presentations. We've got some other things that are coming in the future. We've got unboxing, sale hauls, all that good stuff. If you have an opinion on Gretel and Hansel, leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear what you think. If you just want to say hi, I'll say hi back. All my links to social media and everything in contact are down below. But other than that, thank you guys so much for sitting down and going through this with me today. I will catch you on the next video, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.